start my talk, which is, Great Scott, how the smartphone changed the future. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Luke. I go by LukeStringer90 online. I'm a mobile developer from Sheffield. Been working in Leeds now for just over 3 years. Got background in iOS development, but I've led teams building mobile applications as well as web applications. I work for And Digital, which is where we are this evening as a tech principal. And I'm really passionate about mobile apps, the mobile community, so much so that I thought, let's start a meetup in Leeds and see if anyone comes. And people did come, so thank you ever so much. So if my first passion is tech and mobile in particular, my other passion is Back to the Future. And I am a massive nerd for Back to the Future. And this is just some of the things that I have done or bought. Me and my 6-year-old son there, Oscar, we go to Comic-Cons, usually about 2-3 times a year. We sat in a DeLorean with a hoverboard. It was very exciting. My desk at home is adorned with all sorts of tat, but namely these 3 posters of Back to the Future, along with the Out of Time license plate, which I'm very proud of. And also, I built the Lego DeLorean, which took me embarrassingly long, but was very satisfying on the least. So when I thought about doing a talk for Leeds Mobile, I thought, what things am I passionate about other than mobile apps? And Back to the Future obviously popped in. So I thought, how could I combine the two together? And it also occurred to me that with the iPhone coming out literally tomorrow, my pre-order's in, it will be 17 years old. That is old enough to legally drink. And I thought, that's something to reflect upon, right? It's been a while since the iPhone and Android phones came out. So should we have a look back through time at how the world has changed? And what better way to do that than to jump in a DeLorean and actually go back in time? So for those of you who don't know what Back to the Future is about, it's about a time machine built out of a DeLorean, of course. And there's a few things that you need in a time machine to be able to go back in time. The first of all, it's the time circuits. And then it is the flux capacitor, which makes time travel possible. Now, this device here on the left, this tells you where you last went, where you are, and where you're going. And we're going to go back in time. And we're going to go back in time to when Steve Jobs stood up on the stage in Cupertino to announce the first iPhone, which was January the 9th, 2007 at 9:41 a.m. Now, interestingly here, this number, 9:41, if you ever look at any of the promotional material from Apple for iPhones or iPads, the date, the clock will always be 9:41, even now. If you've ever wondered why, it's because that was the time that Steve Jobs pulled out the iPhone from his pocket. So we're going to go back in time then. So let's accelerate up to 88 miles per hour, get the flux capacitor fluxing, and arrive back in 2007. And here he is, Steve Jobs, rest in peace, showing us really the future. And it looked like the future at the time, and it's hard to argue that that wasn't the future. So how did Steve pitch it? Well, he pitched it in his normal Steve Jobs style, right? He talked about the competition, and this was the competition back then. And he pointed out that these devices were fine, except for this lower 2/3, these keyboards. You'll probably remember some of these, so Nokia, BlackBerry, Palm Trio, the Moto Q. These were the smart devices at the time. And Apple postured that you don't need that, let's just make a giant screen. And it's weird when they say giant screen, because these things are teeny tiny now, really. But the other thing that they hit upon that was a winning formula was you don't want a stylus. You've got, as Steve Jobs says, we've all been born with the best stylus, the finger. And they then used that to come up with the concept of multi-touch, so being able to pinch and zoom and drag. And as Steve Jobs says, they definitely patented it because it was absolutely revolutionary. And this device combined 3 things. So an iPod, I don't know if anyone remembers an iPod, but that was another revolutionary device, a mobile phone, and an internet communicator. And he really did hammer this point home to the point where he showed this animation probably about 5 or 6 times, saying, this is a single device with all these things in. And now these devices are our computers. They do everything, but at the time combining these things together was seen as really something that only Apple could do and Apple could do well. So it was very, very exciting. So that was 2007. So what did it have? Well, it had a touchscreen interface. It had mobile Safari, iPod and iTunes integration. It had a mail client, SMS. It did all the things that we expect a smartphone to do now. But at the time, having all of these things together was really quite revolutionary. Yes, and it did change the future. So a couple of months later, it launched. It launched in the UK. £381. That's a bit of a weird round number. I couldn't quite find the exact RRP, But I think that was a combination of things being imported from the US and one thing or another. But suffice it to say, that really did change our relationship to an awful lot of things. To photography, everyone had a really good phone in their pocket. Or maybe not a really good phone, but a phone that was in their pocket that they could use. And everyone takes photos now. I'm recording this video on my own iPhone. Communication, we could talk to anyone, anytime. And in some ways, that was a really positive thing, bringing people together, making more connections. But also it has some social downsides as well. Maybe we're a little bit too connected these days. News was much easier to consume. Newspaper sales have gone down and down and down over the last 20 years, and the smartphone really did accelerate that. And being able to watch things on your iPhone or your Android device, as it soon became, really changed the world as well. We do a lot of our media consumption now, if not most of our media consumption, through these devices. So, next year, 2008, the next iPhone came out, the iPhone 3G, and I have it here. So this was the first iPhone that I bought, and it does just about turn on. What did this have? Well, it was called the 3G, so the big thing here was it had 3G connectivity. The original iPhone used Edge, which was dog slow, but 3G is pretty slow these days. It also had GPS, so you could do navigation on Google Maps, push email and exchange support, so this made it something more attractive to businesses being able to use it for work email, and that was £299. But really the biggest thing that the second iPhone did was the introduction of the App Store. And at launch, there was 500 third-party apps. 500 is pitifully small compared to what we have now, but at the time, we went from 0 to 500. It made it super simple for distribution, made it super simple for people to acquire new software, to get new updates, new distribution. The old world of going to PC World and buying something off a shelf, this was the end of that. And then from a developer's point of view, it really did empower people to be independent developers. You could just publish things on the App Store. Of course, Apple would take a cut, but the SDK and the revenue sharing was something that was absolutely revolutionary. And another little relic that I've got here, this is my iPhone 3 development book that I bought around this time, which taught me how to make iPhone apps in Objective-C with manual memory management for the iPhone 3. It's totally defunct now. It should go in landfill, but I can't get rid of it because if I hadn't read that book, I wouldn't be stood here now. So it's very, very important to me. So 2008, we had the App Store. And with the App Store came some apps, and these are pretty, mainstay these days, but the Facebook app, the Twitter app, that's the old Twitter logo, the Evernote elephant, fantastic, and also Shazam, being able to literally say, what am I listening to now? These were all crazy advancements. I used to take all my university notes on Evernote, for example, which was pretty cool for tagging and organizing things. So what else happened in 2008? Well, BlackBerry, they were still going. They were still making devices. They thought, you know what? We've got that market share, and we've got our loyal user base. So 2.6-inch screen, it had GPS, it had a QWERTY keyboard, and BlackBerry OS 4.6. I think it was £479. But of course, there was some other competition, and that competition was from Google. And they thought, you know what, we're going to get into the smartphone market, and we're going to come up with our own competitor to Apple. And Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they're announcing Android in 2008. And for reasons not entirely clear to me, they decided to do that wearing roller skates. Not sure what that metaphor is. A very different vibe to Steve Jobs with his turtleneck. But they announced it nonetheless. And the key thing here was it was based on Linux, so it was an open system that really did encourage a proliferation of devices and operating system variants that different people could create, different companies. There was a real emphasis on user customization, and ultimately it was some competition for Apple, which is always really good. And competition it was, and Apple and Google played off each other for the next couple of years at the very least. So the first Android device was this, the HTC Dream, for £399. So this was the first Android device with a really cool design. So it could work in portrait, but move it into landscape, you could flip the screen up and you would get a keyboard there. So what was this? A 3.2-inch touchscreen, a slide-out QWERTY keyboard, and it had the full suite of Google apps, so Gmail, Maps, Calendar, the Android Marketplace, so not the Play Store, the Android Marketplace as it was called at the time, and home screen widgets. We didn't get home screen widgets until 12 more years on iOS. So well done, well done Google. You beat Apple quite considerably there. So what else was happening? So these were the apps, right? Google Maps, Mail, and YouTube. These icons look terrible. That's because they were very, very different at the time. So they didn't have the new sort of rounded design. This is what it would have looked like. And this was around the same time when Spotify launched as well, really changing our relationship to music and really helping to accelerate that move away from buying physical media or even buying DRM locked music to being able to stream the music. So that was another really important thing. And really, I think around this time, the concept started to change. This was part of Apple's marketing from the original iMac in the late 90s, that they wanted the Macintosh to be the digital hub. So the place where all of your media and entertainment and content production really centralized. But really, it was starting to centralize here. So music and video and photos, music production, everybody can do those kind of things now on a device. The fact I'm using my own iPhone here sort of proves that point, really. And that's a really key sort of turning point. So 2009, we then got the next version of Android, Android 1.5. What did we get? Well, we got copy and paste, we got video recording, we got an on-screen keyboard here. So Google started to read the writing on the wall that people didn't want physical keyboards anymore. In fact, they were happy with using on-screen keyboards. And of course, we got Bluetooth. And another important thing that Android 1.5 brought was the naming convention. So this was the third iteration of Android, and they decided to name all of their future versions after pieces of confectionery. So this is the third one. So this is the C in the alphabet. Can anyone remember what this was? And if you can remember, you will win a Star Mix Haribo. I think, John, you had your hand up first. Congratulations. It was cupcake. Now get your brains thinking. We're going to be doing that a little bit more, okay? Okay. And these were the next devices. So you'll notice they don't have any keyboards. So the HTC and the Samsung, Samsung now still really part of the innovative Android development, hardware development companies. HTC absolutely was really key back in the day, but they've sort of fallen away now slightly. But they're two iterations of Android 1.5 there. We then got an update for the iPhone 3GS. Had a 3-megapixel camera and video recording. That was £339. The design of the hardware, exactly the same, but we got some new features. We also got a brand new operating system, iPhone OS 3.0, so not iOS, but iPhone OS. What did we get? We got Spotlight Search, we got Copy and Paste, which Android beat Apple II, of course, and Voice Assistant, which would eventually become Siri, of course. Later on in the year, Android 1.6 and Android 2.0. What did we get here? Well, we got the quick search box, a little bit like Spotlight, text-to-speech. You could use navigation now in Google Maps and live wallpapers, so really pushing the hardware of the device. What was Android 1.6 called, everyone? Remember, we're on D now. Sam? Don't know. Very good. You win a Haribo. What about Android 2?
Declare. Sorry, I didn't Android.
Okay, there you go. And these stylized donuts and eclairs, these are just fantastic. It's really nice to see Google having a bit of fun with these things. So what were some of the apps that we had back then? So 2009, we had WhatsApp, which really brought together those two different ecosystems, and WhatsApp is still absolutely a mainstay now, bought by Facebook at some point after this. Dropbox as well, as a way to sync files. Interestingly, Apple tried to buy Dropbox. They wanted to use it for their file cloud management system. Dropbox declined. Not entirely sure why, but Apple then had to go on and create their own ecosystem. And Angry Birds. So this is the first game here. Now, there were games before Angry Birds, but I've added this here because I played it a lot. But also, this was a mobile phone app that became its own industry. This has films and video console games and plushies. I think I've got an Angry Bird plushie at home for my son. It's just incredible. The marketplace really did change the way that software was distributed. And this is no more true than Angry Birds. It really could reach that global market really, really easily. What next? So 2010, we got the first Nexus device. So this was a 3.7 AMOLED screen, 5-megapixel camera. And that was shortly followed by the next versions of Android, Android 2.2 and 2.3. Here we got USB tethering and Wi-Fi hotspot support, which didn't come to iOS for quite a number of years later. We also were able to use NFC and also SD card app installation. So you could plug your SD card in, get more expandable memory, and install your apps there, which is something that you can't do on an iPhone even today. Okay, you all know what the question is. What's 2.2? You've all had Haribo. Okay. What are we on now? We're on F. Think of a confectionery beginning with F. Nope, not fudge.
Floss.
Not floss.
Froyo?
Well done, Froyo. Who would eat lime green Froyo? That looks disgusting, doesn't it? Okay, 2.3. 2.3. It's a G. Well done, gingerbread. Okay, 2010. What else happened? Well, we got a new iPhone, and we got a redesigned iPhone. We got squared off corners. We got this metal design, the new glass design, and the Retina display. The first thing you notice when you pick up this iPhone is not just how small it is, but how rubbish the screen is. We're all used to high-resolution screens these days, and the Retina screen on this was the first example of that. Also, Apple they changed TAC to build their own system of a chip. So they got the Apple A4, and this really started their transition to their own silicon, which in the long term resulted in them moving to the M1 and the M2, which is what their whole Mac lineup is on now. And with the iPhone 4, we also got iOS 4. Notice we dropped the iPhone bit now, and that's because the iPad had been released at this point, and so this was an operating system for both devices. We got multitasking. Now this UI is very different to what we have now. You would double-click the home button, and a little tray would pop up, and you would simply select the app. We don't have that now. We have like full screen previews. We can also put apps in folders. We got Game Center and iBooks, and these two applications here were a really great example of Apple embracing the skeuomorphic style of application user interface design, and that is building UIs that mirror their real-world counterparts. So Game Center looks a little bit like something you might see at a casino. iBooks looks a bit like a book stand, doesn't it? They went the way of the dodo. A little bit of a spoiler there. So what else? 2010, we got AntennaGate. So if you don't remember this, when the iPhone 4 came out, it was noticed that if you held it in a particular way, what you could do is you could block off the two connection points between the two antennas and basically prevent your phone from contacting the cell mast. And Apple had to acknowledge this, and their solution to it was to give everyone a free bumper. So the bumper was a case that went round the side of the phone. Steve Jobs had to basically call a press conference to talk about this. And he gave everyone a free bumper. He sort of span it in a way that was quite funny. We can't make enough bumpers, which sort of admitted to the scale of the problem, I suppose. But that was an unusual misstep from a hardware point of view from Apple, and I thought I should include that for the purposes of balance. So, later on in the year, Steve Ballmer, having originally totally lambasted Apple for bringing out the iPhone, decided that Microsoft should get into the mobile phone business and actually get into it with an operating system on Windows Phone 7. And looking back at this was quite different. It was really nice to see a fresh new take on user interface design. So the tile view that you had here, the previews of the different applications, it was really fresh and different compared to what iOS and Apple were doing with their very skeuomorphic design. These were the controls, so a real dark theme, the set of icons. Now, we will get dark themes in iOS and Android much later. And if we've got any iOS developers in the room, this doesn't look a million miles away from SF Symbols, the actual symbol library that Apple provides us all now. So in some ways, Microsoft, it pains me to say this, was slightly ahead of the time. So they designed an operating system, they partnered with HTC, and they came out with the HTC 7 Trophy that was running Windows 7. Windows Phone 7, I should say. 3.8-inch screen, 5-megapixel camera, 720p video, £429. So some more competition, really good. What happened in 2010? We also got some apps. So we got Uber. That is the old Uber icon that I didn't realize until I had to Google it. That really did change our relationship with getting taxis and the way that we commute around cities and things. And Fruit Ninja, played Fruit Ninja a lot. So that was an app that made use of the swipe gestures, which was really good fun. And it really showed that you could have a simple idea. If you could do it well in an app and you could get people to buy into it, you could make it a financial success, and Fruit Ninja was an example of that. So 2011, the following year, we got Android 3.0. Google at this point decided to move the design aesthetics in a different direction. And as you can see here, this was the first time they properly embraced Android tablets. So it made use of the big screen, big widgets, etc. Can anyone remember what Android 3 was called? Sorry? No, not Haribo. Not Haribo. It begins with H, though. Well done, it was honeycomb. And although this wasn't a tablet, this was deemed a phablet, somewhere between a tablet and a phone, the Galaxy Note came out with the included stylus. So kind of going in a very different direction to what Steve Jobs said that he wanted to do with the iPhone. And it's interesting here, 5.3-inch phablet screen. When the iPhone 16 Pro arrives at my house tomorrow, it will be 5.3 inches. So we've actually arrived at a point where the phablet is just a phone these days. So our times have changed. Later on in 2011, we got the iPhone 4S, and I have one here. This was my second iPhone that I bought. This had Siri and an 8-megapixel camera. I queued for this from 4 o'clock in the morning outside of Meadow Hall in Sheffield because I had nothing better to do as a student. It was cold, it was miserable, and I regret it entirely. But I do have the iPhone that I can bring with you this evening. And with the iPhone 4S, we also got iOS 5. What did we get? Notification center, newsstand, another very skeuomorphic app, sort of pretending to be a newsstand where you might buy a magazine. And importantly here, it went PC-free. So before iOS 5, you had to plug your device in and synchronize it with iTunes. So you had to have a computer. Whereas now, you can just use it and the cloud technology takes over. Very impressive, but something that we all take for granted now. And then we have the next version of Android. So Android 4. What did we get in Android 4? Well, because they now have this tablet user interface that they brought in iPhone 3, Android 3, they then unified it. Face Unlock, which is something that we wouldn't get until 6 years later in Apple and in iPhones. Data usage control and Android Beam, which, although was discontinued, was kind of like a predecessor to what, if you're an iPhone user, you'll recognize as AirDrop. So again, really revolutionary features that were first there in Android that Apple waited to see how to do it and then would bring it to their system. Okay, Android 4, what was it called? Wait.
Almost.
I'll give it you. Ice cream sandwich. Okay. And what were some of the apps that we had back then? So Just Eat launched, Airbnb launched. That's the old Airbnb logo. Instagram, of course, bought by Facebook, and Temple Run. And Temple Run was probably the first game that really popularized the Infinite Runner game, which you don't really see as much now, but at the time it felt like everything was going to be an infinite runner. I remember when Nintendo brought Mario to the iPhone, it was an infinite runner. Even Mario adopted it, right? So at this point, 2011, what other things have been changed? Well, our relationship to travel has changed. So you don't need to stand and hail a cab anymore. Just get your phone out. I've not had a black cab in such a long time, just because it's so convenient. You can also pay for it, just like Biff is doing there with his fingerprint. I don't even use my fingerprint. I just use my phone these days. And of course, with Airbnb, being able to find a hotel really quickly on your phone really revolutionized things. And food delivery, although we can't hydrate pizzas with a Black & Decker pizza hydrator, unfortunately, things like Just Eat, Uber Eats, Deliveroo, again, that really changed our relationship to how we got food deliveries. It really standardized the way things worked, and getting things delivered to your door was probably a little bit easier than it needed to be. So, 2012, we've also got Android 4.1. What did we get in that? VSync timing for animations, which is a very technical way of saying the user interface was buttery smooth. I think they actually called it Project Butter. I think that's what it was called. Try and really make those animations really nice. Bidirectional text support, so that made it available in countries that had text going right to left, as well as left to right. Offline voice typing, expandable notifications, really building on what they've been doing with notifications. 4.1, we're up to letter J. What was that?
Jelly bean?
It was Jelly Bean. How are we doing for Haribo?
Good.
We also got a new iPhone as well, the iPhone 5, and this was the first iPhone that was bigger. It was a 4-inch display. It had 4G support, so going up from 3G to 5G, and the Lightning connector. So prior to that, it was a 30-pin connector, which is what I have here. And this is what the iPod used. And they decided to come up with a different technology, the Lightning connector, which was reversible, which was nice, but still proprietary to Apple. So, you know, good, but not so good. £529. We also got iOS 6. What did we get? Well, we got Apple Maps, which was bad, I think is the best way to put it. It didn't work half as well, even a third as well as Google Maps, unsurprisingly, because Google had all of that historical data. I remember using Google Maps and there was a spelling mistake and it had labelled the nearby city of Doncaster, Duncaster, which is quite funny. I always remembered that. Passbook as well, so being able to add tickets and eventually cards and vouchers to your device, really, really useful, that I use all the time now with Apple Pay. And the YouTube app, God rest its soul, the YouTube app as built by Apple, they got rid of it in iOS 6, which forced Google to build their own YouTube app, which is perfectly fine, but I think that's an interesting point to remember there. What other apps did we have? Well, Snapchat came along at this point, really changing the way that people interacted with each other with social media, sending expirable images to each other. Can you tell I've never used Snapchat? But I'm told on the internet it was really important. And also Clash of the Clans. This was a game that really popularized gaming on mobile devices. It also really popularized the freemium model, where you could download it for free, but then using in-app purchases, buying more things. It really did work out as a financial success. And I think Clash of the Titans was the first app to turn over $1 billion, which is absolutely crazy. Where are we now? 2013. BlackBerry's still going strong. They're still launching devices. And with the Z10, they dispensed with a keyboard. So they thought, you know what, these touchscreen things probably are pretty good. So let's launch a 4.2-inch device running BlackBerry OS 10, £479. And then, in 2013, Apple decided to reinvent the user interface with Johnny Ive there. And this is a video that's on YouTube, and I've stolen this shamelessly. But here, they really did decide to rethink the whole user experience. So the spacing, the fonts, the colors, really trying to focus in on content and consistency and clarity rather than something that's extravagant with skeuomorphic designs. Really just try and get to the core of what these applications should do and should look like. And the video is quite funny because it looks like Johnny Ive is locked in a white room discussing all of these things. So what did we get? Well, we got this brand new UI, right? But we also got some interesting additions as well. So we got Control Center, so being able to control all of your sensors and everything. Multitasking now, because we've got a much more powerful device, we could do full screen previews. We didn't just get that little tray that popped up at the bottom. And AirDrop, which is really useful when it works. And my God, Apple, if you could just make that more consistent, that would make me happy. I don't need anything else in iOS 18. Just give me AirDrop that works. But it's good. And of course, Android. Oh no, jumping ahead. We also got some new iDevices as well. So we got the iPhone 5S. This is not the iPhone 5S. This is the iPhone SE, but this is the size of the iPhone S. So the taller device. We also, at this point, got the Touch ID. So you can open your phone with a fingerprint scanner rather than a 4-digit code. And Apple also experimented with a slightly cheaper device made of plastic and different colours. These are really fun and exciting. It didn't work out for them financially, so they didn't continue it, but the iPhone 5C was really nice to have that sort of variety of things. And now Android, they did release a new version of Android in 2013, Android 4.4. We got immersive mode, which again was a tweak to the user interface, perhaps a slight nod and wink towards what Apple was doing with translucency as well. Okay, Google, being able to use that for your voice assistant and wireless printing. What was Android 4.4 called? We're on K now. Kit Kat, congratulations. If you could do the honours, please, Kate. And also something that you may have not even realised. Amazon released a phone in 2014. They released the Fire phone, which was based on their Fire operating system. So the Kindle Fire and all of their tablets, they're still going now, and they thought, well, if it's working for tablets, why not have a go for phones? So they had this really gimmicky feature, 3D enabled. There were 2 cameras up here that could track your face, and so when you move the phone, there was kind of like a faux 3D effect. Yeah, it turns out that was just a gimmick and no one really wanted it. It also had this really nice feature, Amazon X-Ray, which I'm sure shopkeepers up and down the land were not too pleased about. You could point your camera at something in a shop and it would tell you how much it was on Amazon and buy it straight from your phone, so pretty cool. It didn't take off though, so it went up in flames. So 2014, what else did we, that was a success? We got the iPhone 6 and also the iPhone 6 Plus, the bigger brother, the biggest size of iPhone. So this is phablet territory here, absolutely. So 4.7 inch display and a 5.5 inch display. And you can see here, I've got the prices the wrong way around there, haven't I? It would be strange how that's cheaper than that one. But you can see we're creeping up in the prices here. We're getting closer and closer to where we are now. And with that came out iOS 8. So what did we get? Well, we got health tracking straight from the app. So it could use your device as a pedometer. You could input your values of calories. And it really did start to change people's relationship with tracking their health. This also coincided with the Apple Watch launching. So Apple really did pitch that at health, people who were healthy conscious, fitness people. You can tell I'm not a fitness person. So it all went into health. We also got iCloud Drive. If Apple had bought Dropbox, it probably would have just been Dropbox, but that was their implementation of a file navigation system with things in the cloud. And Apple Pay launched in the US. And the reason I've included this here as launching in the US rather than the UK, which happened a little bit later, is because not a lot of people realize that prior to Apple Pay, chip and pin and contactless wasn't really a thing in the US. They just didn't have any standard. There were still lots of like signing signatures and things. It wasn't until Apple, and then shortly followed by Google, announced this using the NFC chips that it kind of like dragged a lot of the states into using contactless payments like the rest of the world basically. So it's quite interesting. We also got a new version of Android. What did we get in this? Well, we got Material Design, which was a new design language, which still forms the basis of what most Android apps looks like now. We've got better lock screen notifications. We've got an improved Android runtime, so things worked faster. And also it supported 64-bit devices. So some of the newer phones had 64-bit processors. You could really take use of that power there. Android 5, what are we up to now? We are on to L. Who said that? Be brave. Well, you've already had your sweets. Anyone who's not, everyone knows lollipop now. Okay, look. It is a lollipop. It is a lollipop. Congratulations. And at this point, we've got these brand new design systems that both Apple and Google have adopted. So skeuomorphic was out. All of these things that looked like the real world counterparts, including the microphone, were out for flat design and material design, which we still mostly have these days. I think I prefer this, but I do have a soft spot for this. This is more, I don't know, this is more interesting. It's more exciting to a certain extent, and everything's perhaps a little bit plain here, but you know, I'm not a UX designer, so what do I know? But there you go. They really did converge on these two things. Okay, BlackBerry, they're having a few more throws of the dice. They thought, you know what? We've tried keyboards, we've tried just touchscreens. Why don't we just have one with both a touchscreen and a QWERTY keyboard? So that's what they did in the BlackBerry Classic, running BlackBerry 10 OS, £349. Samsung, they always have been kind of pushing the edge of innovation with lots of really crazy designs. Some worked, some didn't. But this one I thought was worth calling out. The 6S Edge with the wrapped display that went around the bezel with a premium glass. Also a premium price, at least for the time, £700. What else did we get in 2015? Well, we've got iOS 9. So here we've got transit directions. So Apple Maps are catching up with Google Maps. You can actually use it as a sat-nav now. We also got news, as Apple's own news aggregator, pulling in lots of different sources from different news platforms. We've got low power mode, which I think is interesting because it's quite good, but also kind of admits that the batteries are a bit rubbish. Again, that's something that I wish Apple would do better. And interestingly here, Apple built an app for Android to make it easier to transfer your Android data over to an iPhone, making it even easier to jump over to Apple's walled garden from Android. However, if you were sticking with Android, you did get a brand new operating system, Android 6 in 2015. Here we've got native fingerprint support. We've got Doze mode, which was a system level API that allowed applications to conserve battery when they weren't being used. We also got USB-C support, which came, text notes, 8 years before Apple. And we also got improved app permissions. So historically, at least at the start, Android allowed developers to kind of do whatever the hell they wanted with the networking APIs and the location APIs. So you're giving more control to the users, really promoting privacy. Okay, what letter are we up to now? I think we're up to, what do you have? M. Was that you? Marshmallow, thank you. Who's not had a Haribo yet? Okay, you've got some more chances. So everyone else, play nice. And perhaps the last throw of the dice the BlackBerry Priv, is that how you say it? 3.5-inch display. It had a touchscreen and a slide-out keyboard, which was pretty cool. Does anyone know anything more interesting about this device?
It failed.
I've kind of foreshadowed that a fair bit, actually.
Is it the last one that they tried?
No,
Just a flip round, do you think?
no. Why have I not shown you anything on the screen?
Or is it Android?
It's running Android. So, who said Android? Give that man some Haribo. Okay. Fine. Yeah. So Android running on the BlackBerry. So they totally abandoned BlackBerry OS. They thought, you know what? If we're going to try and be successful, we should try and get with the competition. And it was running Lollipop. A little bit too late. Okay. The SE. Now this is the SE. So small edition, I imagine is what it was called. So remember we had the iPhone 6 Plus, this ginormous thing, and people like me wanted small phones back. I was in the minority apparently because they don't have any small phones anymore. So they brought back the iPhone 5 size, but the idea here was it had the modern internals. So it had the chip, it had the camera, it had the fingerprint, the Touch ID, and it was reasonably priced, so £359. In 2016, we also got Android 7. So here we got Picture-in-Picture, which came 4 years before we got it in iOS. More notifications improvements, a global autofill framework, and Project Treble, which changed the architecture of the underlying apps, making it easier for people to distribute updates for their Android applications. So really quality of life there for the developer experience. Okay, Android 7. What was that called? We're up to O now.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I've screwed up here. I've got this down as O. Pretend that's O. What could O be, everyone?
Oreo.
Right, it is Oreo. Yeah, I think you're right. It's nougat, isn't it? I think I've mixed 7 and 8 up. Okay. I spent more time doing the animations than learning the alphabet. All right. We also got a new version of iOS 10. So we got Raise to Wake. So you can lift your phone up and it would wake up, which is nice. Photo memories. These are still wonderful. I get these for my son now, and he's only 6 years old, but being reminded of what it was like 5, 4, 3, it's really wonderful getting that on a day-to-day basis. I also get random pictures of people who I went to the pub with, including you 3 guys on my home screen every so often. So thanks for that. Message stickers, third-party integration for Siri, so you could talk to Siri and get it to do something in Snapchat, for example. So better developer experience. And then Google, they came out with a Pixel, so their first device, and a Pixel XL. So really following in the footsteps of the plus size, so a 5-inch and a 5.5-inch, £719. And another app that came out in 2016 was Pokemon Go. And this was a success, and this man here is taking it ever so slightly too seriously. He's got more devices than me, hasn't he? So this was a Pokemon app, but it used augmented reality, so you could see the Bulbasaur in the room with you. It also encouraged people to get out and about, social interaction, go and explore, make some, burn some calories, do some physical activity, go to a Pokestop. And if that Pokestop happened to be nearby a local business, that really increased business in that local area. It was really quite a phenomenon, and it still is. I mean, it had a really big hit at the time. People still use it now. Okay, Android 8. I think this is where I've got muddled up, so I think someone is going to get a very easy Haribo in a minute. What did we get? We've got quick app switching, multi-window support, neural network. So on these devices now, you actually had a neural chip, so there was an API to interact with that. And the Daydream VR hardware and APIs, unfortunately they were deprecated, but that was something else that was in Android 8. So this is nougat. So sorry, I got it the wrong way around. And then in 2017, the iPhone 10 came out. Not the iPhone X. A lot of people said iPhone X. It wasn't the X, it was the 10. And this was sort of the first big new iPhone since the original one for various reasons. So it really did have I went to a rejuvenation clinic, as Doc Brown did there in 2015. There was no buttons on the front. It was a bezel-less 5.85-inch screen. No home button. You simply navigated through gestures. Face ID with this combination of cameras up here. This is what all the iDevices have now. And of course a neural engine. And the neural engine was necessary to be able to do all of the facial recognition. Also had dual cameras, so the first iPhone with 2 cameras. And a whacking great price tag. I remember when it was announced at $999, I thought, that is crazy. But that is just the price of phones these days, and everyone's just sort of like accepted it, but it was crazy at the time. So the iPhone X came with iOS 11, so we got Face ID unlock. It worked a bit like that. We also got augmented reality. So that was being used in Pokemon Go, but we got it formalized in iOS 11. And also we got a new and improved control center with more customizability. After iOS 11, Google plowed forward with Android 9. So what did we get there? Gesture navigation, similar sort of thing. So if you didn't have any physical buttons, you could swipe up from the bottom. Rounded corners in the UI, an emphasis on digital well-being. So the operating system being proactive and saying maybe you should put your device down. Maybe this isn't entirely good for your own mental health. Really positive for the hardware and software manufacturers to be embracing that, and auto brightness as well. Okay, what letter are we up to now? Checks notes. I think we're on to P. So what was P? No.
Did they stop doing it at P? I think they still do it.
Yeah, he's split it.
Anyone?
Peanut butter cup.
No.
Corn pie? Pecan pie? No.
Just pie. They just called it pie. Felt like they missed a trick there. They could have had pecan pie or pork pie or something. I don't know. Anyway, there we go. Android Pie. What else? iOS 12. That came out in 2018. We got group notifications. We got Memoji, which is slightly gimmicky, but I quite like it. I've made a Memoji that looks like me, and I've used that ever since as my avatar. Screen time. So again, Apple embracing the digital well-being, you know, giving you a way to track how long you're spending on the device. This person here is playing a lot of Minecraft. 12 hours. Sounds like my son. And shortcuts, being able to automate things directly from your iPhone. I use this. This is really nice to be able to do certain things. Very often these days I think, I can build an app for that, and then I go, I could just make it a shortcut, and I don't build an app. So maybe that's not a good thing, but anyway. Some other apps that came out. TikTok. I've not used TikTok either. I'll put my hand up to that. But it is, you know, quite a cultural phenomenon. We've also got a number of games. So Fortnite and PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds. So these were 2 games that really brought the Battle Royale style of gaming to cross-platform, so to mobile as well as PC, and really popularised that. And that was something that Fortnite is still absolutely massive, right? And you can play it on your device as well as playing it on a PC or a games console. And it really did change all of our experiences when it comes to games, whether that be casual gaming with things like Candy Crush or Angry Birds or Temple Run, or whether it's something more serious like Fortnite, etc. We can now do modern gaming on those devices. And health as well, whether it be your own physical health, tracking how many steps you do, how many calories you burn, or your digital well-being, you know, maybe taking a step away from your device. Dotbound can't hold his liquor, by the way, if you didn't know that. Android 10, 2009. So what did we get there? We got dark theme, we got live captions, we got foldable support, slight foreshadowing for what's coming, and dynamic photo support. So being able to take a photograph and then after the fact change the depth and change the exposure and change the dynamic parts of the photograph. Android 10, what did that get called? What level are we up to now? Q. You didn't get one. You didn't get one. They stopped doing it. So thank you, Google. You gave us all the way up to pi, but now it's just 10. So all the rest of the slides are a bit boring. So you've run out of Haribo. You're not going to win them anymore. But we did get the Galaxy Fold. Look at that price. £2,000. Well, I guess it is sort of 2 phones, isn't it, really? So Samsung really still pushing the boundaries of what a mobile phone should be. And it is really cool, right? This is what hardware manufacturers should be doing. There's an argument to say that all devices now are just these rectangular glass boxes. The fact that that Samsung are still trying to push this, I don't think this is massively successful. Also, this original one here, this hinge was not good at all. It cracked and failed after so many thousand opens and shuts. But an interesting device that capitalised on Android 10's foldable support. We then got the iPhone 11 Pro later on that year, and this is the first device that had the Pro thing, the Pro name alongside it. I guess it was Pro because it had 3 cameras, really good cameras, I should say. But interestingly here, you got the Lightning to USB-C cable in the box. So it wasn't a Lightning to USB cable, it was Lightning to USB-C cable. Sort of a nod and a wink to Apple maybe moving with the times, but they're still Lightning at this point. And with that also came iOS 13. What did we get? We got dark mode, which I use all the time now. I probably couldn't live without it. The same as Android, they got dark mode. Signing with Apple and QuickType, sort of nice sort of quality of life features. And then 2020, what a year. But it was also an interesting year for mobile devices. In April, Apple and Google, for the greater good of the world, I should say, put their heads together and came up with the exposure notification framework, which was a cross-party framework that allowed iOS and Android devices to communicate with each other and allowed you to track the spread of COVID. So you would get the exposure alerts on your phone, whether or not you were an iPhone or an Android user. And it was using the low Bluetooth energy protocol, so it was battery efficient. It was decentralized, so a government couldn't go and spy on that information if they wanted to. And the UK government, as well as every other government, eventually adopted this, despite trying to roll their own solution. So yeah, an example of where smartphones really were pivotal in society there. Android 11, what did we get in that? So we got native 5G support. So around 2020, we got 5G. I remember one of the first things I did after the first lockdown was go to IKEA. And in IKEA, it had 5G in the car park. And there was a big, long snaking queue into IKEA because you had to be socially distanced. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I was getting like almost 20 times faster network on my phone in IKEA's car park than I did on my home Wi-Fi. So that was a crazy sort of revelation. What else did we get? We got notification history, chat bubbles, one-time permissions. We've run out of Haribo and they're not doing that anymore, so we'll move on. We got the iPhone 12 mini. Oh yes, they gave us that small phone. I was really happy when they brought this out. A 5.4-inch display, 5G enabled, but it had all the same features as its bigger brother and bigger sister, the iPhone 12 and the 12 Max. And it was wonderful. It had a not very good battery because it was only small. But I was really pleased to see that Apple brought that device back. They discontinued it though, they don't do it anymore, which is a shame. And also we got iOS 14. What did we get? We got home screen widgets, a full 12 years after Google. So well done Apple, you finally caught up. App clips, which were a way to see localized information on your device. An app gallery, so a different way of organizing your apps, and picture in picture. 2020, what else did we get? Well, we got the Pixel 5, so another Pixel device. That was another 5G enabled device, a 6-inch OLED, and it was using recycled aluminium. So here, Google and Apple are taking the steps towards being more environmentally friendly, which was really, really good. And when I was preparing these slides over the last couple of weeks, I looked at what came out in 15, 16, 17, 18, and Android 12, 13, and 14, and I honestly couldn't find anything that was that interesting. So what we're going to do now is skip all the way back to September the 19th, 2024, i.e. now, and have a look at what we're getting. And in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, we are getting Apple Intelligence and soon Gemini. So these are the new AI tools. So the new generative AI, large language model based tools in both of these systems. So being able to generate images, being able to do things with image manipulation, being able to do really fantastic optical character recognition, being able to write things, make recommendations, and having these in the palm of your hand, I think it's hard to argue that this won't be revolutionary. I want to play around with Apple Intelligence, see if it's as good as Apple say. They've got very different models. Apple want to do as much stuff locally on the device as possible. Their whole business model is we respect your privacy, whereas some of our competitors don't. Although they will have to go to the cloud for a few things. Whereas Google, their business model is quite different, really. If you think about it, they've been able to read all of your emails in Gmail for the last X amount of years. Their whole model is in the cloud, and as such, that model might actually be better. So that's something that really does feel like the future, but we've now arrived in the future. But one thing that I want to point out is that these two devices now, and these two operating systems, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between them, really. And it's hard to argue that the lack of competition from BlackBerry or from Microsoft or from Nokia, etc., it's hard to argue that's a good thing. It's probably not a good thing. We do have this duopoly, And is there really that much incentive for Apple to outdo Google? I mean, they've even stylized Apple Intelligence similar to Gemini. So, I don't know. What does the future hold? Well, I hope it holds some innovation. I mean, maybe it's this, right? Maybe where we're going, we don't need phones. Maybe we're all just going to sit in augmented virtual reality. I imagine not, because from the people who I know who've used Apple Vision Pro, for example, it weighs a ton. We're all going to need massive neck muscles if we're going to sit on that as long as we are on phones. So who knows? But as Doc Brown did say, the future isn't written, and the future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one. And for the people here who've come to Leeds Mobile, presumably you're interested in mobile. So, you know, go out and make the future and make it as good as possible. And that's my talk. Thank you.